Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Now, I am going to do another deck tech on my Magic the Gathering deck. Today, the highly requested Frodo deck. I do have a link to this one available in my Mox field. I will put that in the show notes down below. The name of this deck, I know it was you, Frodo. You broke my heart. This deck is one of the first precons that I purchased and then upgraded. And so I'll talk to you a little bit today about how I chose to upgrade this deck and the many, many fun ways that I have to play this deck. This is my favorite deck to play. And hopefully by the end of this video, you will see why. Now, I like to remind you guys, I'm fairly new to the Commander format. I'm familiar with Magic from years past. I mean, back in high school in the 90s, I had tried playing it, but it just really didn't stick. There really wasn't a strong community to kind of pull me in, and the Commander format didn't exist. Just in the past year, I've gotten into it. I started with just a pre-con standard deck. It was one of the Bloomburrow sets, and just fell in love with the game all over again. My good friend over at Muscles and Magic the Gathering, Bobby Maximus, started talking to me about Commander. We built a Lateral deck together, and then I was off to the races. I started building all kinds of decks, mostly just theoretically on Moxfield, where I didn't actually have to purchase cards. I didn't have to invest any money. But once I started building decks, I wanted to start playing those decks. And so then it became a game of hunting down the cards, purchasing the cards to have them to physically play. And now I have 13, going on 14 Commander decks that I've built. Some precons, some upgraded precons, and some from scratch. So this is one of my upgraded precons. So let's take a look at our Commanders. And I say Commanders because this is a special deck. It is a dual Commander deck. So we start with Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit. He's a legendary creature, halfling scout, 1 white, 1 black to cast him, and he partners with Sam, loyal attendant. Now, he has vigilance, and whenever Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, attacks, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, the ring tempts you. Then, if Frodo is your ring bearer and the ring has tempted you 2 or more times this game, you get to draw a card. So what is this tempting? That's where this little cheat sheet comes in. This is the ring. So each time it tempts you, you're going to get another level of this card. The first time, your ring bearer is legendary, can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. And again, if Frodo is attacking, and if I'm gaining 3 or more life per turn, that becomes really important. It becomes a lot harder to block him. The second time you get tempted, when he attacks, you get to draw a card and then discard a card. So he's good for card draw. Whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat. That can be really annoying when you're playing against somebody who's trying to prevent you from getting that life gain, which is going to be one of the key strategies to this deck. And then finally, the last one, whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. Again, this is a life gain drain deck. You'll see how this plays. So when I first started this deck, I did not understand this ring mechanic very well. It becomes a lot of stuff to keep in mind when you're going through the game. So it is really handy to have that nearby. And like I said, he pairs with Sam, loyal attendant. Sam is 1 colorless, a green and a white to cast. He partners with Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit. So when this creature enters the battlefield, target player may put Frodo into their hand from their library and then shuffle. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you can create a food token. For 2 colorless and tap, you sacrifice the food token, you gain 3 life. Activated abilities of foods you control cost 1 less to activate, which means it really only takes 1 mana to sacrifice a food. Sam is a food generating card. We are trying to make as much food as possible, which is awesome because it kind of fits that Hobbit theme. So with Sam and Frodo on the board, we're creating food tokens. So let's talk a little bit about how this is all going to work together and how this became a life gain, life drain deck. I'm going to start moving through some of the cards that I have to support these two. We'll get into some of the strategies of this deck. And we're going to start here with just sort of the basics. So I'm going to take my commanders. I'm going to move them off to the side. I'm going to bring in here some of the basic cards you need for commander. 1, got to have a soul ring. It's a 1 colorless to cast. Basically, it allows you to get 2 mana, even on your first turn. An arcane signet, Again, you can add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. I've also added in here a commander's sphere, which adds 1 mana of any color of your commander's identity. You can also sacrifice this to draw a card, and a chromatic lantern. So lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, or you can just tap the chromatic lantern to add 1 mana of any color. Mana is going to become really important in this deck, especially as we're generating those food tokens. So let's start talking about some of the lands that I have. I usually will save lands kind of towards the end, but in this deck, they're actually really, really important. And I want to start off with a couple of sorcery cards that I have in here. The first one is Cultivate. Cultivate allows me to search my library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one on the battlefield, tap the other one into your hand, and shuffle. So it's a tutor for lands. Farseek, similarly, you search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain, put it onto the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle. So another tutor for lands. Now, for specific lands, this one is worth mentioning specifically, the Rogue's Passage. It will add 1 colorless, or for 4 mana and a tap this, target creature can't be blocked this turn. And again, if I've got Frodo and he's tempted down to that bottom level, it's instant damage against other players, unblockable. Additionally, I have Access Tunnel. Target creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. And again, if we look at Frodo, he's got a power of 1. So that counts. Those make Frodo unblockable. And again, if I'm trying to get that little bit of damage to my players, that's one way to do it. Now let's look through some of the lands I have, because these are beyond basic lands. So I've got Ash Barrens, which will allow me to add 1 colorless, or it does basic land cycling. So for 1, I can discard this card, search my library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. It's kind of like a tutor. This one, similar effect. This is the Shire Terrace. Sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield, tap, and shuffle. And Evolving Wilds, same thing. So this is getting more and more lands out earlier in the game. A couple other specific lands worth mentioning. The Necroblossom Snarl. So this one enters the battlefield. I can reveal a swamp or forest card from your hand. Otherwise, it's tapped, but it adds 1 black or 1 green. The Shine's Shadow Snarl is a tongue twister, is a white or a black. And the Sandstep Citadel is a white, a black, or a green, all of which apply. So having those out is going to get me specific mana colors when I need them, hopefully early on in the game. Now looking at some of the other lands I have here, I've got Ghost Quarter. This one allows me to get a basic land out, or does colorless. I get a green or a white. I get a green or a black. I get a green or a white or a black. All of these cards that I have in here, Brushland, Canopy Vista, Shattered Grove, all of these are a way to get specific colors out onto the field so that I can cast specific cards. And now I want to talk about some of those specific cards. So if we keep in mind here that we are generating tokens, specifically food tokens, then Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit makes sense. Now this is a saga card. So as your saga card enters and after your draw step, you add a lore counter, then you sacrifice it after 3. So this will work over 3 turns. The first part is to put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature and create a food token. The second one is to draw a card, create another food token, and then create a 1/1 white halfling creature token for each food you control. So this actually will help me get more food on the table quickly and then create tokens based off of that food. The Gilded Goose, also really good at generating food tokens. When the Gilded Goose enters the battlefield, you create a food token, and then you can do 1 colorless and 1 green to create a food token each turn. We're going to get into Tireless Provisioner. Now, this is an elf scout as landfall. So whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token. See where this is going? Prosperous Innkeeper. When Prosperous Innkeeper enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. So we're creating tons and tons of tokens. Then we're going to play Farmer Cotton. When Farmer Cotton enters the battlefield, you're going to create X 1/1 white halfling creature tokens and X food tokens. So the more mana I have, the more food tokens I can create. Then Unleash the Banquet Guests. Affinity for food. It costs 1 less to cast for each food you control. Banquet Guest enters the battlefield with twice X +1/+1 counters on it, and I can sacrifice a food. Banquet Guest gains indestructible to the end of turn. So I can make this into a monster real quick. Similarly with Rapacious Guest, it has Menace. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, I get to create a food token. So if I'm already sending Frodo in and doing damage to my opponents, especially if he's been tempted 4 times, I'm going to get more and more and more food each turn, multiple sets of food each turn. Whenever you sacrifice a food, you put a +1/+1 counter on Rapacious Guest. When it leaves the battlefield, target opponent will lose life equal to its power. That loss of life is going to be really important as we go through this deck. It's going to start making sense in just a moment. Now, a card I definitely have to mention here with all this token generation is Academy Manufactor. If you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create one of each. So this is going to get token, token, token. And again, I am definitely creating food tokens. So this is, in effect, doubles the amount of food tokens that I'm going to make. And then Rosie caught in the south lane. Now, when Rosie caught in the south lane enters the battlefield, create a food token. There you go. Whenever you create a token, you're going to put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control other than Rosie. Rosie is going to be the key to several infinite combos. I'm going to keep that one nearby. Let's talk about some of these other cards and how they're going to work together. If I put in animation module, whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are placed on a permanent you control, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. For 3, I can tap this, choose a counter on a target permanent or player, and give a permanent or player another counter of that kind. So suddenly, all these other tokens that I've been generating can become food tokens. How about Scurry Oak? Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Scurry Oak, you may create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. What happens if we pair that with Rosie Cotton? So again, when she enters, you're going to create a food token. And whenever you create a token, you're going to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature other than Rosie. So you put it on here. Whenever you put +1/+1 counters are put on Scurry Oak, you may create a green squirrel creature token. Rosie, squirrel, Rosie, squirrel, Rosie, squirrel, infinite squirrels. All right. Herd Baloth. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Herd Baloth, you create a 4/4 green beast creature token. So now instead of little 1/1 squirrels, we're creating 4/4 beast tokens. Same idea. Rosie Cotton creates infinite squirrels or infinite beast tokens. So that can become a board wipe real fast. Now, additionally, and I've been hinting at this all along, it's a life gain, life drain. So we're going to have Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose in here. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And how about if I put Marauding Blight Priest? Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. So if I've got all these food tokens, and every time I tap one, I get 3 life, I'm doing damage to my opponents just by eating that food. Additionally, Exquisite Blood. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. And how about Sanguine Bond? Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So if I eat a food, I'm going to gain life, opponent loses life, I gain life, they lose life, infinite life drain. It's a scary deck. Now you might say, what does Frodo have to do with vampires? Listen, Frodo's been tempted by the ring. He's in a dark place. Now, I have some fun cards in here. First of all, with all this life gain, I'd be remiss if I did not include Felidar Sovereign. He's got Vigilance, Lifelink, he's a 4/6, but at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. See how much fun this is? We're having a good time. Additionally, this is my dream, is to get this one to work. Bilbo, Birthday Celebrant. If you would gain life, you gain that much life +1 instead. So already, I've got that life gain going on. If I've got my Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood, this is just going to kick off that infinite combo. But to pay all of this stuff, I can exile Bilbo, Birthday Celebrant, search my library for any number of creature cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. You can activate it only if you have exactly or 111 or more life. So again, with all this food gain, if I can get that life up, I can get Bilbo on the battlefield, I can just overrun the board with all my creatures all at once, which would be a ton of fun. Now, with all this life gain, with all this life drain, I got to include my Mirkwood Bats. Look, it's a 4 to cast it, but it has flying. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. You see how effective that card becomes with all this life gain. Now, additionally, I've got my Chatterfang Squirrel General. He's got Forest Walk. He can't be blocked as long as my defending player has a forest. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens are created instead. And if I combine that with Academy Manufactor, where I can create a clue, food, or treasure token, I create one of each instead. Or I can combine that with Rosie Cotton. You start to see, again, more and more infinite combos, more and more infinite token generation. Now, with all that, we also have to worry about what happens if my big cards get taken out. So I've got in here a little Fumigate, destroy all creatures. But you're going to gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. I can get nasty. Dusk and Dawn. Dusk destroys all creatures with power 3 or greater. That'll protect my commander. And then Dawn, Aftermath. Cast a spell only from your graveyard, then exile it. Return all creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So if I do wipe the board, I can still get my my vampires back out on the board. I can still get some of that life gain, life drain back. Now, some more removal I've got. Toxic Deluge. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you pay X life. If I lose life, you're going to lose life. All creatures get minus XX till the end of the turn. And Fell the Mighty. Destroy all creatures with power greater than target creature's power. Now, that allows me to really dial it in and get specific with which creatures I want to annihilate. All right. Got an instant here. Exile target non-land permanent. You lose 3 life. I'm okay losing life, because what happens when I lose life, right? Go for the Throat. Destroy target non-artifact creature. That'll get them out of there, and for cheap. It's only a 2, 1 colorless, 1 black. Mortify. Destroy target creature or enchantment. Path to exile. Exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, so that's a good way to just switch something powerful out for something not so scary. And Swords to Plowshares. It's a 1 white to cast. Exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. Again, starting to kick off that life gain, life drain stuff. Now, I've got Heroic Intervention here to help protect my commander. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. You can see how that's very useful. Harmonize, another sorcery, just allows me to do some card draw. 3 cards there. Shamanic Revelation, more card draw, and you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Well of Lost Dreams, whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained. If you do, draw X cards. An Idol of Oblivion, draw a card. Activate only if you created a token this turn. Well, guess what? I'm going to create a token this turn. Trading Post. Discard a card, you gain 4 life. If I pay 1 life, I can create a 0/1 white goat creature token. What happens if I lose 1 life? Like I said, I'm having fun with this deck. We've included the Gaffer, because why wouldn't you? At the beginning of each end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, draw a card. With all these food tokens, guess what? Very likely that I'm going to gain 3 life each turn. Treebeard. Trample, Ward 2. When Treebeard, Gracious Host enters the battlefield, create 2 food tokens. Whenever you gain life, put that many +1/+1 counters on target halfling or tree folk. So I can beef up some of my weaker characters. Forgot to include here the Colonian Hydra. This is another fun one. So a bit pricey, but he enters with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever he attacks, you double the number of counters on each creature you control. Again, with Rosie Cotton, that gets out of hand real fast. Speaking of snakes, Winding Constrictor. If 1 or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many +1 are placed on that permanent instead. If you would get 1 or more, you get that many of those counters +1 instead. And then Ozolith's Shattered Spire. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on an artifact or creature you control, that many +1 are on there instead. Just going berserk with all of these tokens. Now, assemble the Entmoot. Creatures you control have reach, which I think is going to be really important if you're going up against, say, JP and his nasty dragon deck. You can sacrifice this card to create 3 tapped XX green tree folk creature tokens, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. So I can create some pretty potent dudes right there. Dawn of Hope. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, draw a card. Archdruid's Charm. Search your library for a creature or land card, reveal it, put it on the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, put it into your hand. Or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It deals damage equal to its power to a target creature you don't control. Again, life gain or token generation. Sandstorm Salvager. When he enters the battlefield, create 3 colorless golem artifact creature tokens. I am creating tokens. And then I can also put counters on them. Seedborn Muse. Untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. Why not? Why not be annoying? And speaking of being annoying, I'm going to put Braids Cabal Minion in there because I like to stir things up. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices an artifact, creature, or land. This is going to distract them. People say you don't want this card in your deck because it draws hate, but they have to deal with it. And if they have to deal with this, guess what? They can't deal with my Sanguine Bond. They can't deal with my Exquisite Blood. They can't deal with all the other token generation I got. They got to deal with this first. So this becomes, yes, it draws attention, but it becomes a shield. It becomes a moment that I can buy a round, maybe 2, before somebody can do something about this to get my engine going. I also have over here, before I get into those, let's talk about Merry and Pippin. Now, you could build a whole commander deck around these guys because they are also partnered. What's different here is instead of creating food tokens, you're creating soldiers. So Pippin also will create a food token, but you create a 1/1 white soldier token with lifelink. It triggers only once each turn. So this becomes kind of your general 1/1 token overrun deck. You could, in essence, switch Sam and Frodo out for these two and do a very, very similar deck. I just chose to stick with Sam and Frodo and the food token because I thought that, well, number one, I like Sam and Frodo as partners better. That's just a personal opinion of mine. I like Merry and Pippin. I just like Sam and Frodo better. And I prefer the food token generation to the soldier token generation. In my mind, it just fits the theme more. And we wouldn't be complete in a Lord of the Rings theme deck without Gollum. So here's Gollum, Obsessed Stalker. He's got Skulk. He can't be blocked by creatures with greater power, which is awesome. Again, if you've got all this life gain, all I have to do is just that bit of damage. If I can get damage through all my opponent's defenses and they can hit, I'm going to win the game. I'm going to set off that combo. And what better way to do it than with Gollum? Now, I also included in this deck Bolas Citadel. You can look at the top card of your library anytime. You can play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, you're going to pay life equal to its converted mana cost. So this is just a way for me to decide when it's time for me to lose some life and kick off a combo. Knight's Whisper, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Whoops, lost some life. Guess what's going to happen? Exile all creatures from target player's graveyard. You gain 3 life for each card exiled this way. Orcish Bowmasters, Flash. When Orcish Bowmasters enters the battlefield and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmasters deals 1 damage to any target. And then I get to amass orcs. And Essence Warden. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. And again, that just kicks off my combos. So I just want to reiterate what those are because these are really fun. Rosie Cotton and either Herd Baloth or Scurry Oak will create a infinite combo. And so here's how it works. You're going to put Rosie Cotton on the battlefield and one of these 2. I'm going to create a food token with Sam, Loyal Attendant, because once each turn, I'm going to create a food token. Rosie's ability will trigger, putting a +1/+1 counter on a creature. So I can choose either Herd or Scurry. The counter on Scurry Oak will trigger its ability, creating a 1/1 squirrel token. The creation of the squirrel token triggers Rosie's ability again, placing another counter on Scurry Oak, and so on. You do the same with Herd Baloth. It's the same thing, but it's the 4/4 beast tokens. Every time I create a food, Rosie puts a counter on Herd. Herd creates a token, which triggers Rosie, which creates a token, which infinite combo there. All right, the next infinite combo is the Exquisite Blood Sanguine Bond combo. So if I have both of these on the battlefield and an opponent loses life, so let's say it's from an attack, I get my Gollum through, I get Frodo through. I might hit him with a Marauding Blight Priest, right? I might get him with Vito, even a Mirkwood Bat. Opponent loses life. That's going to trigger Exquisite Blood. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. And when I gain life, whenever you gain life according to Sanguine Bond, target opponent loses that much life. Back and forth until target opponent is no more. And that goes for all opponents. I can also do the Academy Manufactor. And he works really great with Chatterfang. So here's how it works. I create a food token. So Sam or Gilded Goose, for example. Academy Manufactor sees the food token, creates a food clue and a treasure token. Chatterfang sees the creation of all 3 tokens and creates a squirrel token for each of them. So I'm going to create 3 squirrel tokens every time I create a food token. And again, if I'm creating multiple food tokens per turn, I'm going to overrun the board with squirrels real fast. There you have it. That is the infamous Frodo and Sam deck. It is nasty. It is fun to play. It isn't perfect. It doesn't win all the time. But when it does win, you pretty much know how it won in the game. It's pretty obvious how this deck is stacked. But I enjoy it. I enjoy building this deck. I enjoy playing with this deck. I even enjoy tweaking this deck. So as always, if you have ideas of ways that I can improve this deck, if I can make it faster, if there's cards out there that I'm just not even aware of that you're just like, oh my God, you need this in your deck, put it down in the comments. I love reading this stuff. I'd love to get your reaction to this deck. Is this fair? Is this truly a Lord of the Rings themed deck, or have I gone too far? I've had that conversation with opponents who have lost miserably to this deck. So please share your thoughts, share your feelings down in the comments below. Remember, like, subscribe, do all the things, and tune in next time as I talk more about Magic the Gathering, or check my other videos about tabletop RPGs, other gaming stuff.